Hello, everybody. Today is Wednesday, January the 24th. Today I'm talking about the planet Venus, which just ingressed into Capricorn yesterday, a couple days ago. My last video, I was basically continuing this theme that I started that had all to do with Mars exalted in Capricorn in the square to Chiron on the North Node, and the fact that we're going to have a total solar eclipse in Aries in the springtime. And I think I was just getting carried away on trying to explain this whole riff about the death of God and the meta crisis and all this. And I sort of overlooked the fact that Venus was making the ingress into Capricorn, although I think I mentioned this before in another video that this was going to happen. Jupiter, as we know, is in Taurus, moving direct, and Venus is making this trine to Jupiter right now. I'm already noticing this in sort of subtle ways, such as having a growth spurt, basically, because Jupiter is all about growth. There's this kind of, my modest little astrology channel here is growing, and people are leaving sizable comments, like paragraphs and stuff like that, which is indicative of the nature of Jupiter having a not holding back, right, and kind of leaving lots of comments or something. But aside from this initial beginning of the Venus and Capricorn transit with this trine to Jupiter, of course, as I mentioned, we also have Mars and Mercury in Capricorn. Venus is moving at a quicker speed than Mars, and Venus is eventually going to catch up to Mars, and we're going to have a Venus-Mars conjunction. And what makes this particularly interesting is that Pluto has just obviously gone into Aquarius, and I don't know why I did this Pluto in Aquarius video that got a lot more popular than other videos that I've done, and I'm just assuming it's because there's a lot of interest around Pluto and Aquarius. It is a big deal because Pluto is the farthest out modern planet that we use with the modern form of astrology. So it's going to be 20 years of Pluto and Aquarius. So but I don't know. I wasn't expecting to get so many views on my video, and I don't know what it was exactly. Why I just did something right about the algorithm, or maybe I said something, or what, I don't know. And then the last one I did, I don't think it's cracked 100. So I don't know. And then there'll be videos that I make that I get all, insecure about, and then they end up catching up or something like that. I don't know. I'm not going to get fussed about that right now. But the point is that Pluto isn't in Capricorn anymore. And one of the things that the most basic way you can practice astrology is to pay attention to what the moon is doing. Although I have to admit, the moon right now is in Cancer, and moon is in an opposition to Mercury and Mars. Well, actually, I guess it's technically, as I'm making this video, the moon is separating from an opposition to Mars. So this would not be an example of choosing a perfect election to do a video, because the moon is afflicted by the ray of Mars as I make this. The moon, as I'm making this, is in Cancer, moving towards Leo. And this will be interesting because once the moon goes into Leo, the moon will be opposing Pluto from Leo, which is we got a bit of a taste of Pluto and Aquarius last year, so it's not that new. But what basic thing I'm getting at is that I have found that just following these lunar transits gives you a sense of what the planets in those signs are like. And I have found that, Pluto, I think, I'm not gonna, I mean, I'll just say it, like, I was playing around with Solar Fire, and they have this option where you can, I'm still pretty new at Solar Fire, but I'm looking at these different, uh, presets of, displayed planets and displayed chart points, and you can set this one that says, sacred planets only, right? And they take out Pluto and they take out the malefics, and it's only is it there's this idea that Pluto, I think Pluto does have some potential for destruction and danger and bad things happening, but is perhaps good things about Pluto as well. But the good things about Pluto come from the what's kept hidden, what's kept secret coming out, and that may not necessarily always be a pretty thing necessarily, but it could also reveal information that's useful. But the thing is, anyways, Pluto isn't in Capricorn anymore. So that's kind of what's interesting now is you've got a big a lot of energy moving through Capricorn without Pluto there. And I found that when Pluto was there was often this thing of Pluto feeling like a real kind of obstacle or a real kind of block. And often Pluto is associated with this kind of fixation or just a kind of area of unconsciousness, right? Like the id. And this idea that you have your solar ego that you identify with, and then you've got some kind of unconscious block that might, and then whatever is underneath the unconscious block, you can't get at it, because if you start getting at it, it's it feels like a bunch of anxiety, feels like a bunch of stress, or maybe you're just depressed and you're oh, I'm not going to think about it, I'm going to take it. That's what happens is the body has its own defense mechanisms against the whatever is in the underworld unconscious that it doesn't want to deal with. And there's one of these things about these blocks is that it may sound all well and good to use your powers of conscious awareness to dissolve obstacles, to create more flow in your life. But, it could also be the idea of when there's a kink in a fire hose or something, and and as soon as the kink is done, there's this huge amount of pressure or whatever released. And it's people talk about that with, you could talk about it in terms of things like Kundalini, but I don't want to portray myself as an expert on topics like that. But people have said that there's people trying to work through energetic blockages. Sometimes it might actually be better just to leave the blockage there rather than, try to push through it when it's not the right time, right? But why I'm bringing this up and why I think it's relevant, I think that if you look at the dynamic between Venus and Mars and Mercury and Capricorn, there's a lot of energy there that's created. First of all, okay, everybody knows Venus has to do with desire. Everybody knows Venus has to do with what is compatible or what is harmonious together. And then Mars is going to be the counterpoint to that in some sense. But we know what's interesting is why I like astrology is that people will talk about the trap of dualistic thinking, right? Thinking in terms of binary opposites. And there are binary opposites in astrology because there is whatever. Are you born during the night or are you born during the day, right? Are you of the lunar sect or the solar sect? There is a certain binary that goes on. But there is also, rather than thinking in twos, you can think in sevens, right? Or I think there's also, I'm not much of a yoga guy, but there's this stuff called the three Gunas, which it's you can look at the three Gunas as being Sattva is the one that people try to go for because that's about being, harmonious and, good-spirited and you get your work done, but you're not overly fussed. You're kind of just like peacefully getting your work done in a nice kind of even flow, even keel, without too much stress or hassle. But the other gunas are Rajas and Tamas, if I'm remembering the names correctly, and one of them is more like being that's feeling the sense of inertia, which is being tired, exhausted, depressed, being depleted of energy, feeling just sapped and drained and having no juice, and you don't have any get up and go, you don't have any energy to do anything. Or then the other one is that you maybe feel very active. You may feel like but you're irritated. There's a positive energy, but you feel frustrated. You feel irritated. You feel cranky. And like if there's something gets in a way, you're like a snapshot. Like, ah! And so there's this. The gunas are interesting because it shows that there's like you can't set these up as like a binary with one versus the other. That works in threes, and there's one that is more desirable versus two that are less desirable. But you can't have one without the other two, right? It's not like you can't have one without the other. You have to all three go together, and you're probably going to be going through a mix of these three different forces, right? In astrology, there's a similar principle in the sense that Venus can be contrasted with Mars in the sense of you have what is pleasing and what is desirable versus a kind of a sense of gas in the gas tank, a sense of fire moving you along or whatever, a kind of a martial spirit, or the idea of it could also be like what you like and what you don't like, what you're attracted to and what you want to fight off and move away from. But the thing is, what's also interesting is that Venus can also be contrasted with Mercury, right? That there's this idea of let's not think about things too much. Let's just go with what feels harmonious intuitively. But then Mercury might get hung up on a detail or something, or there's the kind of the thing of like choose your battles. Like Mercury can look at, there might be all sorts of like irritating little details, and you're like, well, if you want to know what's on my mind, it's not a big deal, right? There's just a bunch of small things, but the small little things add up. There's a lot of little small things that are bothering me, right? There's a lot of little details that but Venus is there, so maybe you don't. It's like choose your battles. You don't have to fuss over every little detail, every small thing, but then there is we have desires and we have goals and we have what we want, right? And there's this kind of thing of like you don't want to overthink it either, right? You don't want to be like, okay, making a big mental mess of all the things you wanted. You kind of want to be like, choose your battles and just go and try to go for what you want. And then with the trine to Jupiter right now, there's more of this like smooth flow of harmoniously working together like as a team, putting your differences aside you to move forward to the thing that is your desire. And then there's this kind of thing though about like the obstacles, unconscious blocks, unconscious obstructions. And what's interesting about this situation is that the sign of Capricorn, I kind of feel like Pluto has been a kind of a block or an obstacle for the wherever Capricorn falls in your chart. And now with Pluto in Aquarius, that point of tension, the point of tension that is Pluto is still there, but it's now in a different sign, and now there's a different dynamic around it. Although the thing is, like, you have to realize as well that in traditional astrology, both Capricorn and Aquarius are both Saturn signs, so I think there is a certain degree of similarity between Capricorn and Aquarius. They're both the same planet is ruling them, so it's not as big of a change as maybe going from Capricorn Aquarius to Pisces or something like that, right? Um, but the whole point where I'm getting at is that what's interesting is that I almost like what I was saying about like a kind of a rush or a the free flow of energy that has been unobstructed, that there will be some kind of friction probably, right? And between Venus, Mercury, and Mars. And that's why I was kind of bringing up the thing about the three Gunas, because rather than being so caught up in this idea of being binary polarizations, binary frictions, the tension of the opposites, as the Jungians like to say. What's interesting here is that we have a tension of a triangle tension, a trifecta of tension, in the sense that you have Mercury, which is hung up on the details, who wants to plan things and problem solve things and present the plan in a way which is, intellectually understandable, that is kind of rationalistic, whereas Venus, there's some things you want and it may not be rational, and then Mars may be, Mars is exalted, so Mars is willing to do the work to make things happen, and all these planets are just kind of moving through. But then the thing is, once, like, I feel like there's all this kind of like, and the trine from Jupiter and the trine to Uranus, there's this kind of like, the train whistle's blowing out my door right now. There's a lot of stuff going on. The problem is, though, is that don't get too carried. Like, it's easy to get carried away, I think, right? And the Pluto in Aquarius is still pretty new there, and the kind of tension of these, like, I feel like there's more of this sort of like fluid motion aided by the energies of Uranus and Jupiter in a trine. But then once these things move into Aquarius, and what's also funny though is that this is all going to be happening around Valentine's Day, so there may be like, I don't want to get into my own personal love life or anything like that, but it's like, for me, it's nice to be able to do this because it gives me a chance to have a kind of a degree of being able to just, rather than get hung up on my own life, is to look at these kind of collective energies that are affecting everybody, and be able to deal with large patterns rather than get hung up on petty little small stuff, right? But the thing about the Pluto is that Pluto often is that the little devil in the details, the little thing that seems insignificant or seems hidden, but it's also like, if you understand that little thing, then that thing becomes the key, right? That thing becomes the missing ingredient, the secret that is the that makes it all work. But there's a danger there as well, right? There's a kind of a danger in misunderstanding it, and like, you can also just do this really easily if you really just you're gonna take the thing about like Valentine's Day, and you take the whole the sexual tension between Venus and Mars and all this stuff, and then we're gonna have that going into Aquarius, hitting Pluto. There is something about, like, obviously what you might see is stuff around, there's tensions that come up with the stuff for a reason. There's a reason why, the Victorians were all repressed and all this kind of stuff. There is this whole thing, for the longest time, it was like, women had women getting pregnant and childbirth, there was really high mortality rates for women for a long time, right? So if it's like, if you found somebody fooling around with your girlfriend, or some woman got pregnant with another man, it wasn't just like, a sense of being offended, a sense of being betrayed because, or whatever, but it was be like, not only is your wife knocked up by some other guy, but like, for all you know, like, she could try to have the baby and die, right? It's like there's these kind of things that we don't really pay attention to anymore. But what's interesting is that there's another thing going on with all this stuff, with the that the reason why there was such a high mortality rate was because people, there was a period of time where people didn't understand the importance of basic hygiene, and it wasn't even like necessary even that they had to have such a high mortality rate for women in childbirth. It was because the doctors didn't know what the hell they were doing they didn't consider germs to be a problem, right? There's this whole kind of revolution where the guy who figured this out, there's a sort of like the implications where you tell, like, this is, and I think this is, I don't know, maybe I may have even brought this up with Pluto before, right? I don't know. I've been doing these videos for a while. This may not even be a new idea, right? But it's like the Pluto thing is, it's like a secret or something you don't understand or that's unconscious that can be very helpful, but then it can also draw a lot of what can you say? People might get really pissed off because in the situation, I'm just using this as an example, right? But the guy who discovered the importance of hygiene and germs and cleanliness, this guy was basically saying, hey, you guys, there's something you don't know about, and what you don't know is killing all your patients, or a good number of them, and your whole integrity as doctors, your whole profession of what like, is your respect in you being professionals and having expertise, and your job is to care for people and make sure they don't die. If this comes out that you guys, there's some part of why people die so much and you guys don't realize it. Like, to be, I mean, what science and progress is supposed to have this free spirit of discovery, of, finding out these secrets and putting this understanding into practice so that we have a more enlightened society. But people reacted really badly against this guy, and they were like treating it as like a witch trial. Like, this guy, all of our reputation is in danger because this guy is going to expose that we don't know anything about these things called. There was this huge backlash against the discovery of germs and the implications on the medical profession, right? And the same. There's a certain other things that go with this, like. Whether that's like birth control or abortion, which are still highly controversial and heated issues today, right? But I mean, they could have, like, the Pluto thing is that it could have completely, transformational effects on a person's life. Whether you take, but how do you, like, once you understand that problem that's going on and you integrate it, then, and try to be like, okay, well, how do we make a change? Are people going to be really pissed off at you? Are people going to hate you? Are people going to be afraid that they're going to look really bad? Are people going to be like, my reputation is completely ruined because of this? Or like this whole thing. I mean, I'm just that's just one way you could go with it. There's another way you could go with it. That's like the you have the Venus and Mars and Mercury all together, unobstructed by Pluto, with these trines to Jupiter and Uranus that are moving things along, and you get all worked up, and then by the time you hit Pluto, it could be like, did I just do something that I regret? Did I just make a terrible mistake? Was there something in here that I was making myself unconscious about that I didn't want to look at? And then once you get there to, your Post-Valentines Day, hangover, reckoning, Like, is there going to be like some sort of problem that you didn't realize was going to be a problem? And then you're like, oh, okay, here it is. Oh shit, there's Pluto, the little devil. No, the devil that I was used to sticking me from Capricorn is now a little devil in Aquarius with a different color pitchfork poking my ass from a different direction, right? That's kind of the what I am looking at in terms of this transit, right? This is maybe looking a little bit more ahead because I'm looking into February with this one, but it'll be an interesting transit for sure. I am sure that much, right? All right. Well, this is not as long as my other videos, but I thought I would talk about this while it was on my mind. Thanks for watching, and thanks to all the new followers. Please like and subscribe. Whatever. Have a good day.